I'm Jennifer, and you're listening to the Jennifer Kayla Ruskin podcast. I'm passionate about helping you create the relationship and sex life of your dreams. Welcome to conversations about open relationships, online dating, and conscious uncoupling. Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast. Today I have Charli McConnell on. And I've been raving about her for weeks and weeks and weeks. Today, we're talking about intentional intimacy. Before I dive into how I know her, I want to read her bio. I love to make sure that everybody, we really get to understand who they are, give them a little platform. So let's talk about Charli. Charli McConnell is a women's coach who focuses on women of all ages who want to find their power and increase their capacity for self-love, communication, and intentionality. She works with women on all things life, sex, relationships, and business. She's an RN who specializes in women's services and an entrepreneur who built a multi-million-dollar company in a male-dominated industry. She's been married for 13 years and loves to share the things that have been instrumental in her own relationship. I'm going to do a quick intro of how I know Charli. So Charli and I just graduated sex and relationship school, a program, so we could both be certified. And so we met each other through this program, and then we got really close because we roomed together in Austin. So we had a little house with a bunch of other ladies that you'll eventually get to meet throughout the podcasts. And Charli is amazing. When she was telling us about this business that she'd created, that she built, and then she had just sold it like days before coming to Austin. And I was like, this is a lady you want to watch. This is a lady you want to be around. And this is a lady who's like lady goals. Like we want to be her when we grow up, right? And one of the things that I learned while I was communicating with Charli is her and her husband are really intentional about creating a calendar for their sex life, for their daily life. They have a kid together. And I thought, let's have her on the podcast to teach us how to be intentional about our own intimacy and to reach goals. So I have a few more things to say, but Charli, let me introduce you first. Welcome so much. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're on.
I feel so welcome, Jen. I love you so much, and I'm so excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. And I loved your bio that I always like to normalize our guests and that you're a wife. You're a mom. You're a mom that drops her kid off like at preschool or daycare. Like you're a normal woman who just has this inclination for business. And I think part of this scheduling conversation today probably leans into the business side of you where you're like, get this shit on the calendar, get this shit done. Let's be intentional about our lives.
100%. Yeah, just to give you some backstory. So my husband has been an entrepreneur his entire adult life. I am new to the game. And so I've kind of used him as a business coach in a lot of ways, and he's been incredible. And one thing that we learned really early on when I started running a business is that it's kind of natural for your relationship to take a back seat when you're both running a business. You have kids, children, friends, you have community, you have so many other things going on. And what I kind of observed in our own relationship is that even though your relationship is super important to you, you put it on the back burner because you always know it's going to be there when you get all this other shit done, right? So for us, we finally came to the conclusion that if we put a meeting on the schedule for our business, we show up and we prep for it and we're accountable for it. And so why don't we do that for our relationship? And it's funny, I actually got the original idea from Lex, who is our teacher, and we just kind of morphed it into our own version of that. And so we typically try to do it once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on travel. It obviously does not happen every week because it's just hard for us to get in person. And we're really intentional about set and setting. And so that has been something we've learned over time. We've been doing this meeting for over a year at this point. And in the beginning, we would do it, just on a random night after our daughter would go to sleep, and we'd sit at the bar in the kitchen and we'd talk about it. And at the end of the day, your energy levels for me at least, are typically shit. Like, and that was really showing up in this meeting. And I wasn't showing up for it, right? I was just checking off the boxes and okay, let's put this on the calendar. And so anyway, we decided that we needed to have it during the day in our office, just like we would have an office meeting. And it really transformed, like, and it doesn't work the same for everybody. And so I really encourage anyone who takes this advice and tries to make this for themselves is to figure out how it works for you the best and take notes of it over time and see what you think will make it better for you. Like what we do specifically is not going to work for everyone, but it does give you some ideas for how to create it. So, we actually have like a whole template. I know, Jen, I've shared this with you before, and it has evolved over time. So one of the things that we always start with is a one-word open. And I think I've talked a little bit about this with you, Jen. I've done this in other meetings. And I feel like it really sets the tone for where your head is at mentally when you start the meeting, and the other person is aware of where you're at as well. So like if I come into the meeting stressed and that's my one word open, then hopefully my partner will know to be a little more gentle with me, maybe. And vice versa, right? If it's a really positive note, we know that we're going into it super optimistic and such. So we always start with a one word open. We typically, we will break it into like sections, right? So for us, we have kids. And the first section is, what does this week look like with our family? When are we available? Who's going to do pickups? Who's going to do drop-offs? Are you going to be here for dinner this week? I mean, just like logistical things, which if you don't have a conversation about it and you get to Wednesday or Thursday and you're pissed off because he's not home for dinner, or you made this big meal and no one showed up for it, right? Like just setting better expectations. And so we always start with the week schedule, 2 weeks, depending on what cadence we're doing it at. And then we talk about finances, which is a really tough subject for me. And I am sure that I'm not alone in that. And it's not always a lengthy part of the meeting, but it is something we always touch on. So for instance, at least once a month, we talk about our credit card statements. Where are we at on our savings? Do we have any big purchases that are coming up? Like I wanted to buy like a playground jungle gym type thing for our backyard. And so we had to budget for it, right? Real life shit that you need to talk about with your partner, right? And then we get into the fun, sexy stuff. So I'll stop there for a second and see if you have any questions about the first parts before we dive in.
I love this so much. And I can imagine that sometimes you want to work a little more than just a week ahead, especially when it's logistics. So for my ex-husband and I who share kids, and he has a girlfriend and I have a partner, but his girlfriend's in another city. It's like all kinds of logistics. Like, when does she not have her kid? Can we get on the same schedule? So when you don't have the kids, she doesn't have the kids, you can see her. Who's dropping what kid off to baseball practice and where? Because they're at the same time at two different fields and two different sides of the city. And they're saying, gotta have an extra human. Scott is an amazing helper with us running these kids all around. So for us, we work a whole month out, and it's like, okay, who's going to be where? Who's going to be where when? Who's picking the kids up? I'll do drop off. Can you do pick up? And then I love the finance part. So you've mentioned this to me a couple times, and I don't know why I thought it was like much higher level or more like future thinking. Like, here's our retirement account, and based on today's interest rates, here's where we're at. Like in my mind, that's what this was about. But this is like hard shit. Like, Charli, or your husband, I guess, like, are you spending too much money? Your credit card statement's a little too high. Did you buy a bag? What happened?
100%, Jen. And this is why this was added into the meeting in general, because my partner was like, are you even aware how much you spent at Target last month? Or are you aware that in the last 2 months you've spent this? Because I just was not, I was conscious of it, but I wasn't keeping up with the totals, right? And, a lot of little things add up to a big thing, right? And so For me, money is really difficult to talk about. So it clams me up. I don't like to talk about money. Like I said earlier, I don't think I'm alone in that facet. And for him, it was like, we've got to figure out an easy way for us to talk about this. So how do you want to do it? And I was like, look, if you could just tell me at the end of the month, like what the statement looks like, if I did good or if I didn't do good. And then I know the next month I need to bring it down a level. And of course, you could make it super in depth about like retirement and investments. If you have investment properties, stuff like that. Absolutely. But my mind cannot go there. That's totally not within my capabilities at this point. Right.
But you've created and sold $1 million plus business. I want to lean into this and double click because we're women and both of us have made over $1 million. And the fact that you and I have a hard time talking, because I do too. I fucking hate talking about money. Now, I don't mind asking clients for money. I don't mind creating proposals that bring money in. But when I think about my own spending, and if I had to be accountable to anyone, because Scott and I keep our finances completely separate. I don't have any idea how much he has. He has no idea how much I have or how much in debt I am. And oh my God, like the thought of even having a conversation with him that I'd have to show him like makes me want to hyperventilate.
Girl, I'm sweating just thinking about it.
What is wrong with us? What is wrong? Like as women, we have got to get better at this. We need to feel empowered instead of freaked out.
100%. And I wish I had like the magic button that could do that. And what's funny, you mentioned the business stuff. I can do a cash flow all day long for my business and it does not affect me in the same way.
Right.
But when it comes to personal money, and I think it's just a lot of deep rooted shit that, I may never get to the bottom of. And so for me, rather than trying to dig into what the reason behind it is, I just need to find really creative ways to work around it. Right. And so far this really works. I mean, typically if we meet once a week, which does not always happen, I'm going to be totally realistic there. Sometimes it only happens once a month because we do like to be in person and my husband travels a lot. So if we're doing it once a month, then we definitely talk about finances. But if we've already talked about it and we're doing every week or every other week, then we're not always hitting hard on the financial conversation unless we're saving for something. And if we're saving for something, we're like, okay, we're almost to the number that we're trying to get to. Like we're building a house right now. So this is a big conversation for us. How on budget are we for certain things with the house? So it's all seasonal, right? And it's not always going to be a hot topic every single time you meet with each other. But it is something, if you put it on here, you have to go past it to get to the fun part, which is why the sex part comes at the end. You've got to get all the nitty gritty stuff done first.
You're like, I just got to fight through this part and then I can get to the fun stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Hey there. Did you know that I do online coaching? Yes, I do online coaching in the sex and relationship space. Some of the topics that are near and dear to my heart are open relationships. So that includes polyamory, swinging, or what we call the lifestyle. I also love conversations around online dating. We're talking Bumble, Tinder, Field, and more. And then the last thing that is really passionate and close to my heart is conscious uncoupling. That means we get to break up with people with love and respect, with dignity and hope. We get to create a life for our children that gets to be a little bit different. We can do things better than we have in the past. So if any of these topics sound interesting to you and you'd love to get some coaching from me, check out the link in the show notes or the link in my bio for more information on coaching with Jen. Okay, well, let's move to the fun stuff now that we're both sweaty and,
I know. Isn't it so funny? Okay, so the fun part about the sex part, and I do want to kind of preface this with this kind of meeting can be done for people who are in partnerships, but also people who aren't in partnerships. Like it is still a template that could be changed and altered for where you are in your life. So for our girls that are not in partnership right now, this still can all really apply to you. You just make some tweaks to it. So I just want to be inclusive of that. Because all of this stuff is stuff that, individuals on their own need to be talking about or thinking about or planning and so on and so forth. But now back to the fun, sexy part. So, all right. So this is what I typically do for my relationship, and I recommend everyone else do for theirs. I have clients that use this platform as well. And I typically say, first off, for the female, if you go ahead and put your menstrual cycle, if you're tracking, if you have some sort of insight of when you're ovulating, luteal phase, menstruating, all of those things, if you are in touch with it, and if you're not, I highly recommend you get more in touch with it. But that definitely is really good for your partner. We can't ever assume that our partner is tracking our schedule, our cycles like we are. Mm-hmm. And it just gives them a little bit of insight, like, oh, she's not going to feel good this week. Let's not schedule something this week, or, something along that. So we always put like when we think my menstrual cycle is coming. I think it's just a good thing to be aware of and talk about. And then obviously that affects, sexual experience. So for us, and what I have all of my clients do is, first of all, we typically do 5 nights. You can do however many you want. I always recommend there is a date night of some sort. And date nights can be anything. Date nights can be at home. Date nights can be out to dinner. Date nights are intentional time that you're spending together without a TV, without a phone, without any sort of distractions, where you're giving really intentional time to each other. And it's on the calendar as a date night. So for us, what we really like to do, and I've heard a lot of other people do, versions of this, is you can flip-flop who plans the night. So for my husband, he runs a business and he makes decisions all day. And for him, it's really, really nice to have those decisions taken off of his plate. So he really likes for when I make the dinner plans or spur of the moment reservations, stuff like that. So just be creative with the date night. There's only so many times you can go to a movie and to dinner before it gets kind of stale. Another tip I'll give for date night that sparks conversation, and you can do this at any intimate time, is we actually, and I'll just give you an example. So we bought this little book, and I'll share this link with you, Jen, to put on here, but they're cards. And so they're questions. And I actually give some of these questions to clients, and they're like conversation starters. So like this one says, I feel the least loved when you ... And it starts conversations. And we've had fun ones that are like more fun, sexy conversation starters that are more laughable. And I will literally just stick a handful of these in my purse for a date night. So you're not talking about your kid. You're not talking about your work. You're talking about each other, because everyone falls into that trap, right? All right. So that's date night. The other two that I always like to do are his and her worship nights. Now, people can call these fun names: cock worship, pussy worship, lingam night, yoni night. Make it a fun name just to get you excited. But essentially what it is this night that's all about the other partner. And so if you're in a same-sex relationship, you get 2 yoni nights or 2 lingam nights, however this works for you. It is definitely inclusive, right? So for me, this is where the menstrual part comes into play, because I really like to schedule his nights on the weeks that I think I'm going to be on my period. It takes all the pressure off of me. It's all about him. I don't really have to, I'm obviously facilitating it, but I am not having to really show up in the same way. Right. Mm-hmm. So I really we call it lingam and yoni. That's what we call our his and her worship night. So for his night, sometimes we will take requests. So if he wants a massage, or he, wants a foot rub or something, it doesn't always have to be inherently sexual, but it is something that's just all about them. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to plan anything, and then vice versa. I almost always want a massage for mine. Almost always, because that's my favorite. And it's a night where I can just be like, and half of the time it's a non-sexual massage, and it's all you want. Like, it's what you want for your night. Right. Okay. So we've got date night. We've got lingam and yoni night. All right, sexploration. This is my favorite. So sexploration, and we call it that because it's exploring in a sexual nature. And I recommend, everyone have this as part of your calendar because it's a night where if there's anything that interests you whatsoever, you do that on this night, right? So Jen, like when we learned the 3-minute game in our class,
Mm-hmm.
the 3-minute game was huge for us. And I'll try to give you a link or something to share the 3-minute game so people can reference it. But the 3-minute game was a game changer for sexploration night because it wasn't like you were taking a class or you had to have any sort of equipment, right? Like it was just two bodies together with a timer, music playing, good lights. And you're playing this 3-minute game where it's like, how do you want me to touch you? How do you want to touch me? And going back and forth, because that's essentially what the game is. And setting a timer and like starting as platonic and it's not a sexual nature. And then you can turn it into a sexual game and it still be a 3-minute game. So it's really fun to be creative. For what works for you. But also, I've had clients that have done rope tying classes, kink exploration. So a client of mine was really interested in being flogged. And so they watched some videos on how to flog. And so this one also doesn't inherently have to be sexual. It's creating a safe space where there's no expectations. We're just learning. And that's how we do it. You can make your exploration night a little different if that works better for you.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times there's stuff that people are interested in and they don't have the time to explore it, or they don't have this safe environment to explore it where they don't feel like they have to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And you're both learning, right? There are shibari classes you can join for like year memberships that will teach you how to tie rope in such a beautiful container and very well shot videos, stuff like that. So that one is a big one, right? And
it brings fun, right? There's no pressure. You both just show up and learn.
And what's really fun, Jen, is once you've done it a couple of months, you have to start getting really creative because you don't want to do the same thing every time. Mm-hmm. So you really have to start digging deep in what are my fantasies? What are the things I'm interested in? Read some erotic novels and get some tips from those and say, hey, this was really cool. I mean, you could even use it as a porn. Like, I think this porn might interest me. Let's watch this and see if we get turned on, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone has like their stuff that they go to every time that turns them on, whether it be porn or music or sensual, but like trying different things. Like, hey, a friend of mine really liked this. Let's just put it on and see if we get turned on, right?
So yummy. I had this friend, her and her boyfriend one time, they were into a lot of sexploration play, and they got like a giant canvas and body paint and painted each other naked and then rolled all over the canvas. And then they had this giant piece of art in their living room that when people were like, what is that? They were like, let us tell you a story.
So we did that for an anniversary. I surprised him. I rolled out plastic. He came home. It's actually the business we use is called Love is Art. And they send you all of the supplies and the canvas. And that's what you do. You cover yourself in paint, you roll around, you can have sex or not have sex. You could do it solo if you didn't want to do it with a partner. Super, super fun. That would be perfect for an exploration night or like a sexy photo shoot or anything. Like to each his own. This one is where you can get really, really, really creative. And this one kind of leads me into the fifth one. And the fifth one is like everything is like nothing is off limits, right? So for some people, they use this as their kink night. If you're into kink, if you're into a dom sub scenario, or if you were in to going to different places to have sex or different rooms of the, whatever your niche is. And you could even make this another exploration night until you find out what your niche is. Like give yourself 2 exploration nights to explore a little bit more. But this is the one that's like, okay, if you have a thing that you already know you're into, add that to your list. And so you're going to do at least 4 nights, 5 if you really cling on to something that's adventurous and you want to keep exploring. And the key to all of this, and I don't know that I mentioned this earlier, Jen, is this is not scheduling sex, right? Which is one of the reasons why I like to call it intentional intimacy, because intimacy is not just sex. Like intimacy is time with each other. It's being totally present and authentic and raw and vulnerable and all of the things. And sometimes that leads to sex. But in all reality, it is intentional time that you are devoting to your partner or to yourself, depending on if you're in a partnership or not. And you're showing up for that person and whatever they like or whatever they know that you like. And some of the pushback I've gotten when I've had this conversation with clients and friends is, I don't want to schedule sex. My husband would never be okay with scheduling sex. Hell, I've even had this conversation with my own partner. And that's not what it is. Like, that does not mean you only have 5 nights on the calendar you're having sex. What this means is this is 5 nights, 4 nights, whatever feels comfortable for your relationship, that you are intentional and preparing for what this night looks like. And I know, Jen, I know that you and Scott are really, really good at this. And I wish more people were, but like there are differences between maintenance sex, spur of the moment sex, and intentional intimacy sex, like big, huge differences. And I'm in no way saying that these are the only times you have sex. This is the only time that you need to be intimate with each other. But it puts it on the calendar so there's no pressure the rest of the week. And if you have 2 weeks where, let's say you're not putting intentional intimacy on the calendar and you go 2 weeks and you've just forgotten about each other. And if you're not talking about it, one of you always feels left out, and if you're not in a partnership, you're leaving yourself out, right? And it's, I just had so much other stuff I had to get done. No. This is on the calendar. This is a date. This is a meeting. This is something I've committed to, and everything else is blocked off of my calendar. And so be committed to putting it on the calendar, whether you use a paper calendar or you use a digital one that's going to send you reminders. And if you do, set your reminders for these nights 24 hours in advance. That's a pro tip, because you don't want to do it an hour before. You don't want to do it the morning of. You want to know the day before what's happening tomorrow night. So if you need to mentally prepare or come up with a plan or put all this stuff so that the time that you put on the calendar, those 2 hours, none of that is planning. The planning's already been done. And when that clock starts for that meeting, that time on the calendar, you're totally present. So that's my little pro tip.
I fucking love all this so much. So we weren't planning sex when I met you, but we were having consistent sex, like every other day, every day. Like we have great sex, to your point. And so what this has done now that we've next leveled this with you, with your planner, is the his and her nights, which we were never doing before. Now we're pretty good at trading off. And so it was like every few months, somebody would get 2 or 3 hours of focused attention that always ended up in great sex afterwards. But this makes it more frequent. That's what I love about it. And so when you were talking about, I was calling it yes night. So it's like there's no no's as a yes, right? So like yes night is something you really lean heavily into. And then you were talking about it's for intimacy, not necessarily for sex. It could literally be anything. I was thinking like, what if it's, you guys are really into museums and you live in a big city where there's a lot of different, that could be your night that you go hold hands and have dinner and look at art and look into each other's eyes and like really connect. I mean, I would probably choose sex, but Scott would probably choose the museum and we would do something we'd play Dungeons and Dragons on our 5th night if it was up to him. And that would be like our real connective, play a game night, which is great. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for leading us through all of this calendaring, changing our sex life and our intimacy life, because now it's intentional instead of to your point, it's you've gone a week or 2 and you're like, oh my God. Or I go a day or 2 and Scott's like, you haven't touched me in a day or like I come and I find you and I put my hands on you all throughout the day. You don't come in my office and touch me one time. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I've been so busy. I just haven't thought about it. I could take it to the next level and intentionally put every 6 hours, go find Scott and touch him. So I've always said the calendar is the keys to the castle. Like if you want to accomplish anything, working out, being fit, eating right, friendships, keeping friendships alive, I don't know, everything. I live and die by my calendar. Now, I did have a podcast where I recorded with Ashley Garcia, and she was like, if you make me calendar anything, it's not fun anymore. So she has a much different approach than you do. But you and I are on the same page here, where I'm like, if you want it to happen, if you want to manifest it, it has to be on the calendar. And even our sex life, even our intimacy. And then it doesn't take the sexy out. I found it makes it even more interesting, because then Scott can look at the calendar and say, Friday, I get to do something for Jen. Let me check in and see what she wants, or let me create something exciting. And then he's ready and he's mentally prepared for it, versus like, oh shit, I should probably do something for her.
I think that this plays in a lot with the sexual blueprints.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, Jen. And for me personally, I'm a sensual and energetic blueprint. And so for me, and I don't know that this particular thing is part of that, but I cannot like quickly tap into a sexual mindset. I need to be like, I need to not prepare, but kind of prepare. Like I can't just like show up and you surprise me, and to my detriment. That's not a great thing. But what I've learned is doing this, and I'm going to be totally transparent with you. My husband is like Ashley. My husband is like, oh, we got to put it on the calendar. What? And I'm like, look, this is a partnership and we're both on opposite ends. And so let's figure out how we can marry the two of us together, no pun intended, and figure out how we can make this work for both of us, to where one of us is not always stretching so far over the middle ground to reach the other. And this is what we came up with, because this gives me time to prepare, but also make sure that all of his boxes are checked, and mine, right? So just to put that out there, like not everyone's going to like totally tap into this right away, which is why I really encourage everyone to make this work for you. Like you may not follow all these steps specifically, but if you put at least the meeting in place where you're talking about stuff, even if you don't put stuff on the calendar, even if you just know I'm going to get all this stuff done this week or this month, that's great. That's great. Then you're not like me, and you're not like you, right? Like you just don't need to put it on the calendar. But it still works. Having the conversation and opening up for the other person to share what they want, what they need, what they desire, is growth in and of itself. So,
and if you want to sprinkle the fun in, you have 25 days to have random sex, right? Or to do something sporadic, or to grab your partner and take them to lunch, or
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I love about this. There's enough structure to get the big things accomplished and to prepare. I loved your point of that. Like read a steamy romance novel, go take a hot sensual bath and slather your body in oil. Like have an orgasm at lunch.
If you're really tired and you didn't sleep good the night before, like take a nap, or no, tomorrow I don't want to be tired. Let me make sure I get a good night of sleep. Like, because that's always the thing, I'm too tired, or I've had a really long day. It could just go on and on, right?
Love that. Charli, thank you so much. This was so good. Such good information.
I love you, Jen. Thank you for having me. And I'll come talk to you anytime.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you later.
Bye. All right. Bye.